Buongiorno, sono Alberto Francesco Vizza e voglio dire la storia della famiglia Vizza. It's just a brief history of or a portion of the Vizza family. It all started with Giuseppe Vizza, who was born on a small farm close to a small village by the name of Celico. And Celico is about 40 miles from Cosenza in southern Italy. The area was referred to as the Reggio de Calabria. Therefore, we're Calabrese, and we speak the Calabrese dialect. For example, if you were born in Rome, you were a Romano or Naples or Napolitano, so ergo, we're Calabrese. Grandpa and his family's worked hard trying to scratch out a living on a farm, and they had hard times, droughts and everything else. When he was 13 years old, he and his dad went to Brazil to dig coal to supplement the family income at the farm, and came back, and things still weren't going good. So sometime later he went again to Brazil by himself, because his dad was getting rather old, and he didn't want him to go along and maybe take a chance of getting hurt, or whatever might happen to an older person. When Giuseppe, or Nano as I call him, and I may refer to him as Grandpa too, but and sometimes I might call him Papa, because well, I'll tell you the story as we go along, why I have so many names for him. But he came back, and as he got older, he married a young lady by the name of Giulia Vizza. I'm sorry, Arnone, A-R-N-O-N-E, and Pietro, Giuseppe's dad, was against it for some reason. I don't know why. But he told Nanu that if he married that young lady, he never did want to see him again. And when Giuseppe told me the story many years later, he still had tears in his eyes, because he loved his dad dearly, but he never did say what the problem was. In those days, Italy, the government required that all young men from the age of 18 would have to put 2 years of military service in. They wanted to have a strong, you might say, army with people they could call up for service with some basic training, and it was mandatory. Everybody had to do it. And as a result, he got stationed in Rome and got to see all the beautiful basilicas and churches in the Vatican and all that. And while he was in the service, he and Grandma had 2 children. And in 1900, he thought that Italy wasn't going to let him get anywhere. There was no future there. Things were tough, very, very poor. So decided to come to the United States of America to see if they could maybe make a better living for themselves. They had to leave Grandma behind because of the lack of funds. He bought a steerage ticket and entered the United States through Ellis Island. And if you see me looking to the left here a little bit, I'm checking the time we have for this tape. But anyway, he came through and worked his way out, I don't know, to Pennsylvania and dug coal there for a couple of years. And he would send money back to Giulia Arnone and the 2 kids until they had enough to come over. And remember, she was telling me that of the money he sent to her, she had $150 left over, and she knew that aboard ship things were bad. People would steal to try to keep body and soul together, so she pinned the $150 to her slip strap, and they were going to have to kill her to get that money. And a steerage ticket, incidentally, only bought you space on the ship's deck. and you know, didn't involve quarters or anything else. But I'm sure they had facilities for them to use for the natural course of actions, shall we say. And they stayed out there on deck, rain or shine, until they got to the United States. Well, she entered Ellis Island too, and Grandpa met her and took her to Pennsylvania, and they dug coal and had a little better offer in Baltimore, Maryland, so he moved to Baltimore, Maryland, and that's where Carmela Vizza was born, and I'll talk more about her later. But by this time, one of his daughters by the name of Mary was young, about 14 years old, and somehow or other, Mr. Tony Pantuso asked for her hand in marriage, and they were married, and he took her to San Antonio, Texas, because that's where he had family, and they could make a life together there. So about 1910, Grandpa knew there was no future in digging coal, and they tried to accumulate a little money. They opened up a boarding house and took in boarders and, you know, washed their clothes for extra money, fed them and all that, and they got a little bit of cash, not a lot, but Grandpa says, all right, Julia, where do you want to go? You want to go to San Jose, California, where your brother is, and he can help us get started, or do you want to go to San Antonio where Mary is? And Julia wanted to be by her daughter, so she picked San Antonio, and that's how they came to San Antonio in 1910. And I can remember Don was saying, well, San Antonio, Alberto, at that time was like a chicken coop, just a little place. And I'm sure it wasn't as big as it is today. He developed a vegetable route. Back in those days, you didn't buy produce or anything like that at the grocery stores. There was no refrigeration at that time, and all the produce and fruits and stuff in the grocery store were kind of mealy and, you know, just soft, overripe and everything else. So people bought day to day when they needed their fresh vegetables and fruits. Well, Grandpa built up quite a nice clientele in the area north of Sac Junior College, and it was off of San Pedro. Streets like Summit, Wasatch, Woodlawn, and back in there were homes 2 and 3 stories tall, and God knows how many rooms they had. It was a very wealthy area, and I think the area is referred to as Monte Vista. I hope I'm not wrong on that. You can drive by this today and see the size of the homes. It just kind of knock your socks off. But he would come by and ring his little bell a certain way, and they knew it was him. And the cooks would come out and collect what they had ordered the day before, and he would take their order for tomorrow. But even then, he tried to build his ticket, his sales. He would maybe gamble at the farmer's market and say, buy a lug of grapes that were starting to come in and we're beginning to be in season, and he'd say, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, you want some nice grapes for dessert? They'd say, yeah, Grandpa, give me a couple pounds or whatever they wanted. And incidentally, everybody called him Grandpa. They knew he had a big family and a lot of grandkids. And when it became my time to help him do that work, we would get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and drive his little truck. At that time, he started out with a horse and buggy, but we would drive his little truck over there, and had his specific parking place that he had to pay rent on it. And boy, you better never take his parking place. And we'd walk over to a little Chinese cafe there on West Commerce Street. And incidentally, the farmer's market was located where the Santa Rosa Hospital is just north of there. And a lot of you may know of the Mi Tierra restaurant there, and that's where it was located. And all the Belgian farmers and Italian farmers and people that had truck farms back then would come in the mornings and, you know, display their wares and sell things. And then they would have to import things like lettuce or cherries or grapes or oranges and all that from either California or Florida. And like the building that Meet the Air is in used to be called a commission house. Well, how did it get its name? They would import these things from California or Florida and sell them. Then they would, once they were sold, they would collect their commission and send the money back to the original planters or planters or farmers, and ergo the name Commission House. Of course, farmers market's been changed; it's way out there by Salzamore. But Danu was a hard-working man, a lovable guy, and all in all, he and Julia had 12 children. 6 of them died very early from things like diphtheria, measles, chicken pox, or whatever. And I'm talking about a pretty long time ago. And I'm going to give you a breakdown on his family, the ones that survived. The oldest was Mary, born in Italy, and she married Tony Pantuso and came to San Antonio. The next one born was Uncle James, and he married a lady by the name of Tilly, and he was also born in Italy. And incidentally, he got married in San Antonio. Everybody else got married in San Antonio or Texas. The next person in line was Carmela Vizza, and she was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and she had one son by the name of Albert Francesco Vizza. Then the next guy to come along was Frank, and he married a young lady by the name of Jeanette Dobowaski. They had 3 children, Joe Larry, Shirley, and Patsy. Then came Uncle Earl, and he had 2 children. He married a young lady by the name of Doris Tomasini, and their 2 children were named Earl Jr. and Margaret. And Earl was the baby of the family. And oh, I forgot to mention, after Carmela was born, Fiorenza, or Florence, was born, and she married Pete Cristofoletti. And they had 2 children, a young lady by the name of Mary and Julia. And I think I covered all my bases there, maybe a little bit out of order, but you get an idea of the breakdown between the women and the children that they had. Grandpa was a very, very religious man. We would pray often, have a nice time. He'd make his homemade brew during the Depression and the Prohibition days, and he made a little homemade beer along with his Dago red wine, and we had people come by to see us. To get back to when we would park and it was my turn to be at the farmer's market with him, we, like I said earlier, would go to this Chinese restaurant on West Commerce Street, and we'd sit there and have a cup of coffee and a donut. And I was like, you know, in the 1st grade or a little bit younger than that, and to help him out a little. And man, I thought I was in hog's heaven then. It was like, for me, eating at the Waldorf Astoria. Yeah, I thought I was in real high cotton then. We'd go home, have breakfast, and then make his route in the Monte Vista area. He was bocce champion for quite a few years in a row in the Italian colony where we were all more or less living. And he was a wonderful man to me. Now I'll progress and talk about Carmela Vizza. As I said, she was born in Baltimore, Maryland in 1907. And she married Alex Cadena. And they lived together as man and wife for, approximately 18 months. When I was 9 months old, she just had to leave him. My dad was a Texas Ranger, and they kicked him off the force. He was quite a womanizer, a gambler, and he was trying to become a horse racing magnate. He bought an old nag, and kind of like Seabiscuit days way back there, and only he just went downhill all the way. And Grandma Vizza, or Carmela Vizza, she couldn't take it anymore, so she asked Grandpa if she could move back in with him. And she told him what the problems were and what all had happened, and he, being the man he was, took her back. Well, to supplement income, I remember she'd get up real early in the morning and make a little sack lunch and go look for a job. And she wouldn't come home till dark, and she'd go in her room and just cry because she couldn't find a job. And, we were surviving, but a little more income would have helped. And she felt like she was capable of working. She wanted to be a school teacher, but she didn't get through the 5th grade, and then she just had to quit to help Grandma raise the other kids, wash clothes by hand outside, and help cook, and just a normal routine that in those days the poor women went through. I mean, their means of working and all were pretty primitive. Like, we didn't have a hot water heater at our house, and that they bought in San Antonio, so they would build a fire outside with a big tub of water, make hot water, and transfer some of the hot water to another tub, wash work clothes or whatever they had to wash, underclothes, by hand on a rub board, and then wring them out by hand, and then hang them on a clothesline to dry. And then they needed pressing, they'd press them, or, you know, fold them and put things in place. And it was just, they had a tough life women back then, trying to raise families and all that. Would have been out working and doing what they could. And, you had a job, and you always had to keep looking over your shoulder, because there was a line out there waiting for the fireman to get displeased with you, or you weren't fast, your work wasn't fast enough or good enough. He'd say, okay, go get your pay. And he'd look over there at the head of the line and said, okay, you come on next over here, let's see what you can do. It was just real cold-blooded. My God, it's terrible. And to work under those conditions was, you know, just kind of bad, tough, and all that. But anyway, she finally got a job with a Mrs. Billy Dew, and they sewed costumes for the Fiesta Royalty, you know, the Battle of Flowers Parade and all that. And they worked from almost year-round. Fiesta Battle of Flowers was completed today. In about 2 weeks, they would start making the costumes for the next year. And the designs were already picked out, and the people were already selected, but it was all hush-hush. If you ever go to the Whitty Museum during the Fiesta season, you might see some of her costumes that she sewed. And I don't know if I said it earlier or not, they were sewed by hand. The two ladies worked hard, day and night almost. And the young ladies would come in for fittings. But these costumes that she made would be dated in the height of the Depression, and they would have dates marked by them, like Queen 1936 or 1934 and so on, but they don't, or didn't identify the people who more or less made the costumes or anything. And then after quite a few years, they lost that work. Singer Sewing Machine Company or somebody invented the sewing machine that could do that kind of work, because all those, I should say, rhinestones, sequins, the glitter and all that stuff was all put on by hand and sewn on by hand, one piece at a time. And God, I used to admire her ability to, you know, the beautiful things she would make. So out looking for work again, and she finally landed a job with the San Antonio School District cafeterias, and oh, she was so thankful for the job, and they just loved her to death. She was always a good cook. Most moms are good cooks, and mine was tops. She ended up managing cafeteria at Breckenridge High School, and at that time it was one of the main high schools in San Antonio, along with Jefferson High School. And the war came along, and she could better herself by managing a grocery store for the Becker brothers. At that time they had 4 handy-andy grocery stores, and she worked there, but they were told that if the boys came back home, they made it through, when the war ended, that they would get their jobs back. And there weren't many people that felt that way then, about giving the poor old GI that came home his job back, like they do today. But she understood. So incidentally, if you see me glancing to the left, I'm trying to time this thing, because I feel like this tape can only go about an hour, and I don't want to exceed it and, you know, have to do it all over again. I'm probably doing a pretty poor job of it right now. But anyway, she managed a grocery store there, Handy Andy. Wait, I take it back. She was an assistant manager, and they had an older fellow that helped manage it, but she did most of the work. And so she, in time, lost her job there. World War II ended, and she wanted to go into the restaurant business, and through a nice friend by the name of Mr. Albert Hirschfield, I was kind of working for him as a go get this, go do that. And I had a driver's license by that time, and I drove him around. He didn't drive a car. He's a wonderful man, did a lot. And finally convinced him to give her a chance with this little restaurant she had, which is now at the northeast corner of the International Airport on 410. And we were farsighted enough, Mom and I, to buy some property kind of catty corner. I guess you would say it would be the southwest corner, and then we built a fairly nice restaurant there. She was very successful. The airport authorities wanted that corner that Mr. Hirschfield owned, where the little bitty Skipper's restaurant was located, and it's now part of the airport entrance. And we maintained the name Skipper's because, well, I was in the Navy, and Mom just thought it was nice to call it Skipper's for the lack of a better name. And we had a lot of nice customers. Tom Slick used to be one of our customers. He instituted the Slick Foundation there off of 410 West, and he did a lot of work for NASA with the monkeys, trying to get them into space when they were trying to go to the moon. A guy by the name of D. Howard, who's been a pioneer in passenger aircrafts, Swearingen, a lot of guys. And the people that worked for him were Mom's best customers. I guess I'll go on now and kind of skip on to Alberto Vizza. When I started school, I went to a public school with the name of John B. Hood, and they would call the roll, and I would not answer to my name. I thought my name was Alberto Vizza, and I was taught to honor priests, nuns, teachers, principals, policemen, anybody of authority, and say yes sir, no sir. And I was kind of surprised myself that I could kind of be bullheaded about not answering to the roll call for class. And the teacher would know that, well, I was the only one that didn't answer, and there was this name, Albert, you know, and I would not answer. And it was causing a lot of trouble. So Mom and Nanu, her dad, decided, well, let's get his name changed. And heck, I just thought I was a Vizza. I grew up there with Nanu and his sons and daughters until they got married and went off on their own. So somehow or other they managed to get a hearing in front of a judge whether he was a JP or something higher, I don't know. But I remember this like it was yesterday. We walked in and we had our Sunday go to church clothes on, and they had somebody ahead of us, and then they left. It seemed like we were the last ones to appear before the judge. We didn't have an attorney, we couldn't afford one. And he said, young man, and pointed to me, he says, come here. So I walked over there, and he said, no, come around, come around here. And I went around his pulpit, if you want to call it that, and he picked me up, put me on his knee. He said, what's your name? I said, Alberto Francesco Vizza. He said, no, it's not. And I said, yes, sir, it is. And he looked at Nanu and Mom and said, are y'all forcing this young man to change his name? And they said, no, they didn't know what to do or say. They just knew they, to be there and appear. So he looked at me and he says, did they promise you some candy? Or did they, promise you money to change your name? And I said, no, sir. No, sir. Incidentally, they had the divorce papers and all that. And he had, I assume, had them spread out in front of himself. And I said, no, sir. And he said, well, why do you want to change your name? I pointed to Mom, and she's a Vizza. And I pointed to Nanu, Giuseppe, and I said, he's Giuseppe Vizza, I'm Alberto Vizza. And I was pretty adamant about it, I don't mind telling you. And I was, all this time, kind of shocked at myself for, being so brazen. But really, I was really shocked that I could stand up to the man and tell him that. And he said, did he promise you no candy or nothing? Huh? I said, no, sir. And do you see your daddy? No, I never saw him. A couple of times, that's all. And he said, well, that's good enough for me, or some words to that effect. Hit the gravel on his tabletop there, and by God, my name was Alberto Francesco Vizza. I was happy. Well, anyway, I told you about helping Nanu when it became my turn to help out. But we passed a little school. There was a Catholic high school called Central Catholic, and they had a military program, ROTC, and boy, that just knocked my socks off. God, I was really taken with it, and I told Nana I wanted to go to school there, and he kind of smiled, because he knew I was going to John B. Hood. And when it got to be time for me to enter the 6th grade, Mom went to see, because I kept talking about it, and I was pretty persistent that I wanted to go there. Well, Mom couldn't afford the $90 a month tuition. I mean, it doesn't sound like a lot by today's standards, but back then, that was a lot of money. People worked for maybe $15 a week, and were raising a family, buying groceries, and paying rent on a house, or maybe, if they were lucky enough, trying to buy a house. So she went to see the most influential person she knew at the time, and her name was Mrs. Henry Guerra. And Henry Guerra Sr. owned the Angelus Funeral Home. And today his son, Henry Guerra Jr., is quite famous for his historical knowledge of the city of San Antonio. And he wrote some books and did some tapes on the Alamo and all that. But anyway, Mrs. Guerra was originally a Pizzini, an Italian family that grew up in the same Italian colony where we were growing up, on Martin Street there, on the west side of San Antonio. That was a poor side of San Antonio. It was as if to say it was the wrong side of the tracks of the wrong side of the tracks, if that makes any sense. But we were all happy. We ate, grew up. To get back to the story, Mrs. Pizzini knew some of the Catholic brothers there at Central Catholic and asked them if they had a job or something where I could go to school. They had no scholarships or anything back then. At least we never heard of them. And they said, yeah, they need a guy to wash dishes in the faculty dining room 3 meals a day, 6 days a week. And that if I did that, I would get my tuition. So by golly, we jumped on that, and that's how I got through Central Catholic. And the cute thing about it, one day I decided to not go get my pay, and Brother Henry and he raised the dickens with me, and he told me, you come every Friday to my office and collect your money. So I'd go there on Fridays, and he'd take $3 silver out of his drawer there, on the desk drawer, and scoot them across the desktop to me, and he says, there's your pay. I said, thank you, brother. And I'd shove them right back to him and say, there's your tuition, brother. I appreciate it. Mom told me to be sure and tell them I appreciated anything they did for me, which I did. And I think we wore a pretty good groove on that desktop after a few years. But it was neat to be there with them and watch how they acted, and how one guy would stand up and read prayers or stories about saints while the rest of them would eat. And they took turns doing that, being readers. Then the guy that read would sit and eat, and by that time they were gone, so the cook and I would sit and eat too with them, and kind of shoot the bull a little bit. And he'd go on and get ready for class, and I'd right away get all I could get done before class started, and then if I didn't finish, the poor cook finished it all, and I ran to class, morning class. I looked over there, and then time's kind of getting a little away from me, and I don't want to ramble too much, but as I grew older, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. In the 6th and 7th grade, I was asked to become a mascot for the Blue Battalion there at Central Catholic. And it was a drum and bugle corps with blue and white uniforms, and pretty well renowned throughout the state. And it was a pretty neat outfit. So a fellow by the name of E.B. Brophy was doing it mostly for gas money, really. He had a job at Kelly Field as a civil service worker, and he had a pretty important job there, but his hobby was playing the drums, and he loved working with young people and teaching them how to march formations and play the drums and the bugles. But he was mostly a drummer, not a bugler, and for some reason or other he could not find anybody, a grown man, that would take the time to teach girls or boys how to play the bugles. And I was pretty good at it. I had joined an organization called the Junior Yanks earlier in my life, and they had a little rinky-dink drum and bugle corps, and I was issued a bugle, and I learned to play it, and I practiced. I drove the neighborhood crazy for years trying to learn how to play the thing, and if I say so myself, I got pretty good at it. So he asked me if I would help him teach some girls how to play the bugle, and he would give me 50 cents. And if we were out of town, he'd pay for my food. Heck yeah, bank, that was money, and so I told him I would. I was scared to death, but he established a drum and bugle corps at St. Teresa's Academy, at Hot Wheels Boulevard, a public school, high school, and one in Victoria, Texas, called a convent high school, and they were also called the Sailorettes. Well, anyway, at this St. Teresa's, it was primarily a boarding school with young ladies from Mexico. It was just all-girls school. And there was this little girl there who was kind of a mascot like I was, but smaller, younger. And I don't know, I tried to be friends with her, but she's kind of snooty. And so I developed a crush on a senior bugle major, and I was in love. Oh my God, I was in love. Anyway, I had a lot of fun doing it, and I finally got brave where I could talk to these older girls, and they would practice, and then we'd teach them how to march and all that good stuff. So after a few years, for some reason, when I got to be about a junior in high school there at Central, they disbanded the Blue Battalion, and then they wanted to form a military band because the ROTC components there were great. We had companies and a battalion, and the companies were part of the battalion. And but when they would do retreat ceremonies or retreat exercises, there was no band, and it's hard to get excellent ratings from the government who would come and inspect us without a band. So Mr. Fisher got me and asked me to try to help him recruit guys to play in the band, and we got a nice little band started and all that. And anyway, to progress on, while I was a junior, I got a job, and the war had been going on for some time. I got a job as a cashier at this Handy Andy there on the south side of town. And here comes this nice lady, now I know her name, Mrs. Kutak, and she'd bring this cute little girl in with her, and I finally put two and two together, and that's that little girl that was a snooty mascot drum major, and I couldn't believe it, how pretty she turned out. And she's always, you know, acting like I didn't exist for some reason. I think, I'm not sure, tried to flirt with her, but no luck. And one day they walked in, they always came on Saturdays to buy groceries, and I worked Friday nights, Fridays and Saturdays there. In other words, supplement income, and all the income, incidentally, I'd give to my mother, not only maybe keep a quarter. I got paid 75 cents. We would start after school, I'm sorry, in the afternoons, after whatever we were doing during the summer, and worked from 4 till 11 that night. They started the practice of staying open later at night on the weekends so people could shop when they got off work. Then we go back Saturday morning at 7 and work till 11 p.m. Saturday night. And for all that time, I got paid 75 cents. And I'd give Mom, I'd keep about 15 or 20 cents, and I'd give her the rest to put away or to spend, or if she needed it or whatever. Well, she never spent a dime. She put it away for me for my college fund. We had hopes of going to college. Anyway, Mrs. Kutak and this good-looking young lady would come in there, and I told this guy next to me that was my, we called him sackers, that he would sack the groceries for a customer and even help carry it out like they do today. And I said, you know, see that pretty girl there? He says, yeah. I said, I'm going to marry her someday. And I said, no, what made me say that? I mean, that's kind of dumb. I was just thinking this out. You know, how do I know I'm going to marry her? And I kind of shocked myself. Well, I got out of high school and went into the service, and the war was still going on, and I was pretty heavy in studying all the science I could and all the math I could. And the Navy selected me to go to a radar school, but I had to wait for a class to open up. And so I wanted to fly, but Mom wouldn't sign papers to fly. They had flying training programs that you could go into right out of high school. And we were, 17 years old, most of us. And anyway, I got to put in a semester at Texas A&M during the summer, and they had started an acceleration program. And you could carry a full load. I think my freshman semester there, I carried 18 hours. And I wasn't that smart to carry that kind of a load, but I managed, passed everything. So when it came time to go to the Navy, I went to San Diego and went through boot camp and got sent to Florida to go to radar school to become maintenance men and operate and study the theory and all that. And we had very intensive training, 8 hours a day, 6 days a week, and it was tough, and they really pushed us through it. They said that it was the equivalent to 2 years of college studying one subject, you know, and putting a lot of time into it. So from there, came back to San Antonio and notified my mom and Giuseppe and everybody, and Mr. Hirschfield, the guy that rented Mom her first little restaurant, and but kissed him goodbye and all that, and everybody was crying at the Southern Pacific Depot. The place is now called Sunset Station there, over there by the Alamo Dome. And from there, you know, to the Pacific. And the gunnery fire controlmen were usually located at the top of a ship in what they called a Mark 37 director. And we would take ranges with the radar on either other ships or airplanes, and crank it into this mechanical computer we had down in a CIC center, the Combat Information Center, and then that information was relayed to the 5-inch 38 rifles that we had on there, and they were dual-purpose rifles. They would fire anti-aircraft and surface fire, and I didn't get to do a lot of that. There again, you know, the Navy, they train you for one thing and put you someplace else. The Army's a little bit like that too. I was told board and worked with FAS 3 and 4. They only had 4 of those in the United States Navy, and 1 and 2 was in the Atlantic, 3 and 4 were in the Pacific. So well, all we were was a floating ammunition dump, and we would try to rearm smaller ships and get them back into service with ammunition and things of that nature. Well, I had to stay in the Navy until 1946. The war ended in 1945, and I went back to E&M, thank God, on the GI Bill, because it took about everything we had for me to go that one semester at Texas A&M. I was often wondering, well, what am I going to do? You know, they want me to try to go to college, and I did want to go to college. And I was the only one that fortunate in the whole family to even get through high school, much less college, and or university, whatever you want to call it. Excuse me. But I was fortunate. The government came out with the GI Bill, and they paid for your books and your schooling, and they also gave us $90 a month to for subsistence. But then if we got in a dorm and this and that and the other, that $90 was taken away. So you still had to have a little spending money and all that. So I had 3 little part-time jobs. Most of the time I was the campus bugler at Texas A&M. I put all the cadets to bed, wake them up, call them to meals, and call them to formations and all that. I told my mom, gee, I feel like they're dead, Mother, because I do all these things a mother does. But I was fortunate enough to get out of Texas A&M, and I thought, well, I am not going to be a serviceman if there's another war. So I took an ROTC contract there. I liked the military, I did, and graduated with a BS degree, Bachelor of Science degree, and second lieutenant's commission in the United States Air Force. I was supposedly an aircraft maintenance officer. Well, we didn't learn that much up at A&M. We didn't even have an airplane to look at or, you know, work on. But I was very fortunate. I got my degree, and I knew Grandma Julia, his wife, my mom was just so happy to see me graduate and all that. While I was going to Texas A&M, my junior year, I got an invitation from a young lady. I don't even remember her name, to attend one of their dances they had at St. Mary's High School. And when I came back from service, all the people I knew that were my age were married, gone, or God knows what. And so you almost had to go back several years, a couple of years anyway, to find somebody to date, or things of that nature. Well, I wasn't dating too much or anything. I was trying to stay pretty occupied with my classwork, because I wasn't too terribly smart, but I had to work hard to get my degree, very hard. I should have been valedictorian, salutatorian with the amount of work I put in it, but instead, you know how you graduate summa cum laude, and the ones that win all the big awards. Well, I graduated summa cum lucky. Man, was I glad to get out of there. And but I went to this dance, and doggone, there was that girl again, and she was there and had asked a good friend of mine that I went to high school with to take her to the dance. And even today, in all-girls school, it's permissible for them to call a guy to attend one of their functions like that, and it's not considered being forward. Well, we got to talking and all that, and I don't know, a couple of months went by, and this young girl that I saw again, it was that snooty majorette, her name was Dorothy Kutak, asked me to take her to another dance that they were having, and I'd always wear my Yankee uniform. I didn't have a fancy suit of clothes or anything, and the old uniform was appropriate even though the war was over. So we dated whenever we could. That was it, man. She ran away so fast from me until she hooked me, if you know what I'm talking about. But not having a car or anything, we dated on the bus. And I decided to marry her, and I had one more year to go. And my mom, oh, she was so afraid that it was a big mistake. We were a young couple and all that, and but I just felt like we had to. If not, we might have got into trouble, to be honest with you. So I went to Dorothy's house, and it was Holy Thursday, and I was going to propose. I bought her a nice ring and made a down payment on it. And I was, being from the old school, I asked Mrs. Kutak, Dorothy's mom, if it was all right with her if we got married in the near future. And, oh, she was so tickled to death. She was a sweet, sweet lady. And she wanted to see the ring, so I showed it to her. She says, well, when are you going to give it to her, Albert? And I said, Miss Kutak, I'm going to give it to her after she gets through playing for the big choir there. She played the organ for the church choir as a high school student. And I said, I'm going to give her the ring in church after Holy Thursday services are over. She says, oh, Al, she says, give it to her here. I said, Grandma, here in the kitchen? She says, yeah, I want to see. I couldn't tell her no. So by this time, Dorothy came down, and so all my speech and all went out the window. I said, Dorothy, I'd like for you to marry you in the near future, and I'd like to, for you to give me an answer on it. And I says, I've got a ring here or something like that I'd like to give you. So she took the ring and put it on, and by golly, I guess the right size. And Grandma was looking at us and smiling, and Dorothy was flabbergasted. She didn't know what to say. She said, well, kiss it, Dorothy, my God. So she gave me a kiss. And then later on, I asked Mr. Kutak. He scared the socks off of me because first thing he said was, well, what makes you think you can support my daughter? And I went, duh. Oh, my God. Well, I got $1,700 in the bank saved from the service and college, and I've got 3 jobs, and I can finish school on the GI Bill. I'll graduate all right. And I'm sure I can find a job. And he never gave me an answer. And he just looked at me. I says, okay, Mr. Kutak, I wanted to get out of there, so I left. Anyway, I'll give you a rundown on our family. We got married that summer. But before my senior year, it was July the 24th, 1948. And first child was Dottie Ann. And Dottie had married a young man by the name of Randy Martin. And they had 2 children, little Randy and Allison. Then came Buzzy. He was Albert Francisco Vizza Jr., but I didn't like the name Junior. Somehow or other, I called him Buzzard for a while, and then it ended up being Buzzy, which he liked, and he had hard luck. He's got married twice and didn't have any children. Then came Roy, who married Nancy, and they had a young son by the name of Donovan, and who's also the father of my great-grandson, Dominic. And he married a young lady by the name of Angela. Then came David, and he married Patty Poteet, and she and David had 2 children, little David and Rebecca. And she was married previously and had a young lady by the name of Tina, and Tina's a school teacher, and she married a school teacher also who's also a coach. I understand, a darn good coach, and they have 2 children, a boy and a girl. And I've gone blank. I can't remember their names, so forgive me, Patty. Then came along Monica. She married Ray Coselli, and they had 4 children. The first one was Nicole. The second one was Danielle. Then a young man by the name of Ray, and then a cute little thing by the name of Natalie. Then along came Michelle, and Michelle married Tim Bobo, and they had 3 children. They had Jennifer, who recently got married. They had Timmy, and then they have a cute little thing too by the name of Rachel. And then came along Matt. He's the baby, and he married a young lady by the name of Rhonda Zapalak. They have 3 children. The first young lady was Carmela, and she was named after my mom, which, boy, I tell you, I'm so happy they named her after my mother. Then came Giovanni, then came Luciano, and that's the extent of it. I think I got it a little bit out of order. You got to forgive me. Doing this is a little difficult, but Dottie Ann was first, Buzzy, Roy was second, Monica and Michelle came next, and then David and Matt. That's the proper order. I'll get it straight yet. So we have, at this moment, Dorothy and I have had 7 children. We would have had 8. She lost 1 through a miscarriage before Dottie Ann. And then we have 17 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren. Well, 2 natural grandchildren, Donovan with Dominic, and then Randy, Dottie's boy, has a young man by the name of Jack. And both those 2 little boys are really cute. I'm telling you, they are something else. But we were blessed. God blessed us a lot. Before I run out of tape, I would like to tell you some cute stories about Nanu or some of the other ones in the family. When Nanu was getting old and we got him to retire, television came into play, and they were little black and white sets. And sets were probably no bigger around than that, 10 inches or so. And the only thing they had on sports then was Friday night they had the Blue Blade Gillette fights on Friday nights. And on Saturdays they would have a baseball game, and once in a while a football game, but it was all in black and white. And Grandpa liked baseball. He understood it. He just never could understand football. To him, he said, looks like a bunch of pigs rooting around, trying to dig something out of the ground. And basketball, there's no such thing as basketball in those days on television. And one day, most of the time the Yankees were on Saturday, and I'd turn it on for him, and he'd sit there and enjoy it. And one day I turned the set off, and he says, you know, Alberto, he says, Italian boys are pretty good at baseball players. I said, oh yeah, Papa, I knew, God, we've got a lot of good athletes. And I don't know why I'm sitting crooked in this chair. I don't think the chair is probably out of whack. But anyway, I said, oh yeah, but what surprised me was he would say, well, you know, so-and-so, they got a this, and so-and-so's they got a that. He says, and the Yankees, they got a bunch of Italians. They got a DiMaggio, they got a Yogi Berra, and they got a Rizzuto at shortstop, and then they got the guy, he's a coach, Crosetti on the third base. He says, and then at that time, the Brooklyn Dodgers were still in Brooklyn, New York. And he said he couldn't, you know, sometimes he fractured the language. And he said, you know, the Bruccolino's got a 2, the Bruccolino Dodge. I said, no, Papa, they only got 1. They got Carl Furillo. He said, no, they got another guy. He's a catch, like a bear. I says, you mean Roy Campanella? He says, yeah, but I said, Papa, he's black. He's got an Italian name, but he's black. He said, no, sorry, a guy with a name like that cannot be black. He says, you know what a campanella? I says, yeah, Papa, I know. Campana's a big bell, a campanella's a little bell. But he's still black. He almost kicked me out of the restaurant because that's where we had the TV set. Oh, he was mad at me. Then another time, we were, younger days, we were at the Italian church, and the Syrian people had a church close by. We're Greek Orthodox, but Catholic also. And they came back and joined the Catholic Church again. And every 10 o'clock, that's right, the Mass at 10 o'clock, all the young men would run home, change clothes. Because all everybody had back then was like, they used to say, you know, Sunday go to meet clothes. And man, you didn't wear those but to church and came home. You didn't dare want to tear them or get them super dirty or anything else. And they would play a softball game out there at the John B. Hood School where I first started school. And it wasn't a fancy diamond or anything. I swear to God, it was pure gravel. And those guys would slide and get strawberries on their legs and their fannies. And man, they played it like it was Super Bowl. But anyway, there was an Italian priest there at the time that I want to tell you about that his name was Father Valenta. He's quite an athlete. And he was going to pitch this Sunday, and they had a Father George at the Syrian church, or the Greek Orthodox church, who wasn't an athlete, but they convinced him to play, so they tried to hide him out there in right field. And so all the time, the old fellas bet, fellas like Giuseppe. But that Giuseppe would never bet. He said, no, I work too hard for my money. I no bet. No. But this Sunday, he bet $1. And all the Italian gentlemen said, hey, Grandpa, Giuseppe, you going to bet on this game? He says, yes, sir. We no gonna lose. I said, what do you mean, no, we no gonna lose? He says, man, look who's a pitcher for us. And they said, yeah, Father Valenta. And he says, yeah, well, a while ago in church, he had Jesus Cristo in his hand, Jesus Christ in his hand. And he says, now he's got at the softball. How can we lose? Well, I hate to tell you, we lost. He lost his $1. Darn near become a Baptist after that one. I'll never forget that. So funny, but that $1, oh, it killed him. And he did a lot of cute things like that. He would meet people, and in his excitement, he'd say, oh, I'm so glad you got to meet me, and things like that. And people would just die. One thing nice about it, they never laughed at him. They laughed with him. He's a cute guy. One of the cutest stories about my mom, Carmela Vizza, I can tell you was that I tried to, I tried to be a good boy and all that. And she always said, son, I don't ever want to get you out of jail. I don't ever want to get you out of jail. Like some of our relatives, our neighbors have here, that their boys are bad, they get in trouble, they go to jail, being drunk or something like that. I said, no, Mom, I won't ever get in jail. Well, while she was running, retired rather, she had a wreck. She went to visit Fiorina, and she's driving the Falcon. It was hard to find parts, so she was without a car. Well, it was like a month, and if she went anywhere, she walked. Well, she was behind my back after I made her retire and broke her heart. I thought I was being a nice guy, but really I made her miserable. I'm sorry for that, but my intentions in my heart were in the right place. Anyway, she would go over there and work at the Dobbs House Airline Catering, and she would go to the night shift, because they had a night chef that drank a lot, and he'd come in all, 3 sheets to the wind and couldn't do anything. And so Mr. Blackburn, the manager at Dobbs, would call her, and she would go over there, and I wasn't aware of this until one night he called and says, Al, I'm kind of worried. Your mother's been helping me out. Now, don't be mad, but she enjoyed working, and she really helped me out a bunch, and she hasn't come to work. And I talked to her about 10, and I forgot to send a truck for her because I knew her car was down, and it's 2 o'clock. She still hasn't showed up. But earlier, I sent the truck to pick her up. I finally remembered, oh my God, she's waiting on the truck, when I saw she was running late. And, this camera's crazy, because every time I try to move and stay square with it, one shoulder's higher, the other one's lower. There's nothing wrong with me, really. Anyway, to get back to my story, he said, would you go see if you can find her? So I went to her, where she was living. She wouldn't live with us. It was okay with Dorothy if she did, but she would not do it. She wanted to be her own person. And knocked on the door, and finally ended up kicking the door down, and everything was in its place. Didn't look like there was a struggle or anything. And I woke her neighbors up and told them I was looking for her. We can't find her. So they forgave me for waking them up. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, like I said. And she disappeared. We never found her. I was coaching football at the time, and the guys heard about it when it became daylight and all that. And I don't remember how they heard about it, but the whole football team came down and offered to help me search for her. So we formed a human chain and walked from 410 all the way to Nakoma on the west side of the airport. That would be the area she would have walked. To Dobbs' house, says her car was not working, and we couldn't find a thing until this day. I never have found out what happened to Carmela. And that's why I'm so proud that they, Matt and Rhonda named one of the children after my mom, because it kind of made me feel like there was a little continuity going on there. And it was a very sad thing in my life. But, you go on, and the good Lord's blessed me with a lot of kids, wonderful kids. And you know how children are. You want to pinch their heads off sometimes, and then you want to love them and hug them and all that. And I thank the good Lord for making me have such a beautiful wife and wonderful kids, really wonderful children. And I'm going to have to stop here and see how much time we got. Oh, I appear to have a little time yet. After Mom had her wreck, we knew she was going to have to appear in court and all that, see who was at fault. The officer that investigated the accident couldn't tell for sure. And a couple of months went by. And I asked Mom on that particular day, I said, Mom, did you ever get a notice to go to court, because I was going to go with you? She says, no, son, I haven't heard anything. And this was before she disappeared now, of course. The wife and I were in bed, my kids were asleep. About 11 o'clock that night, she called my house, and which was unusual because she always called. She would call earlier, and she said, "Son," I said, "Yeah, what's the matter, Mom?" She said, "Oh, nothing, nothing." She says, "No, everything's fine." But she says, "This wonderful gentleman here in my apartment is going to take me to jail." I said, "What?" She said, "Yeah, he's going to take me to jail. I didn't show up in court." And I said, "Well, Mom, we just talked about that today, and you never got your notice." I said, "Let me talk to him." And he said, "No, I've got to take her in." He said, I just don't have any choice." And so I said, "Well, what can I do to make it easier on her?" And he said, "Well, if you can get $50 together and beat me to the county courthouse, you can bail her out and she won't have to go through all that booking process and all that stuff." He said, "But that's the best I can do for you, sir." I said, "Well, I appreciate it." So I went through my wallet and my wife's purse, and Dorothy and I finally come up with $50. And I rushed on down there, and she was already being booked and all that. And I hate to tell you, but people in jailhouses are the so-called servants are real condescending. My God. Anyway, he finally called up there to get her down, and he, dismissed me, and I was waiting for her there, and his elevator door opened up, and it was a ugly night, and it was damp and cold, and it was like, the weather is in December when it's ugly and cloudy and all that. But however, as you know, this was at night. She come out of the elevator with her coat on and her head down. I could see she had tears. And she looked like she just got off the boat. Even though she was born in Baltimore. Honest to God, she looked like an immigrant that just got off the boat, poor thing. And she was so embarrassed and crying like that. Just a soft cry, not a hysterical cry. And I looked at her and I felt like I had to do something, so I yelled at her. I said, "Ma," through the bars. I said, "Ma." And she looked at me. I said, "Look who's getting who out of jail. Huh? How about that?" And she stopped crying a little bit, and she looked at me, and she started laughing. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make her laugh. And so we went home, and I kept kidding her about, "My God, Mom, I never thought I'd have to get you out of jail. You disappointed me," All of that was tongue-in-cheek, but I made her feel better, thank God. But I could go on and on for days telling you funny stories about things that happened to the family, but time doesn't permit it. To be serious a minute, I don't remember if I spelled out Julia and Giuseppe's wife's last name. Her last name was Arnone, A-R-O-N-E, and like I said, she had a brother in San Jose, California. Had a very nice farm there and did well. But in case you were curious, I might have forgot that earlier. Like I said earlier, this is kind of a tough thing to try to do this extemporaneously. And I will check my notes and see if there's anything important I might have missed. And hopefully I can remember I covered it. Incidentally, a matter of interest, if you're around Austin, Texas, and go visit the state capitol, all the flooring in there in the rotunda was done by Uncle Frank, Uncle Pete. And they worked for a company called the Venice Art Terrazzo Company, and they were experts at putting in terrazzo floors. All those designs about the state seal and all of that stuff, they did. You can go into any old building here in San Antonio, and if you see a terrazzo floor there, they did it. Uncle Frank also did a lot of the gargoyles and statuary there at Jefferson High School. When that school was finished, it's considered the best looking school in the United States. In fact, a young actress who was like a Judy Garland, but not near as big or prominent, came there and made a movie about Thomas Jefferson, and the Lassowitz, their drill team, and it was called Jefferson High School, quite famous. And my uncles were quite the artists in their own way. They did mosaics, which is a dying art, by the way. They're just great guys, hard-working devils. They did a lot of work around the Will Rogers exhibition buildings up there in Fort Worth, and it's a shame that they couldn't be recognized for the great work and artistry. I don't want to make this thing too long. I mean, it's probably boring as it is, but I've always been kind of a proud guy, and I hope it doesn't show too much, but I tried to keep it reined in, but I've been always proud of my family and where I came from and what we did. I wanted to get this in before maybe the tape played out, but I would like to tell you a little bit of my younger life, and me and Carmela while we were living with Giuseppe Vizza, my nana. God, I was such a good-looking kid, you wouldn't believe it, but the girls would call me all the time, and it kind of upset Mom. She didn't like these girls doing that. But the thing about it was that it was pretty hard to do, because when they'd call, we didn't have a phone. They'd stand out there on the sidewalk and yell, "Hey, Albert," and I'm just kidding. I know a lot of you have heard these stories before, but I thought maybe I'd record it for posterity. And then another one I like to tell, but I can't tell it anymore. People are tired of hearing it. I played the bugle, as I mentioned earlier, and then I did play the trumpet, and I played with the Texas Aggie Band and marched and all that. And I liked it. I enjoyed it. But playing the trumpet's kind of hard, really. I played the trumpet with very little knowledge of music. I tried to take a few lessons from a Mexican gentleman, and I didn't speak Spanish very good. So we had a hard time communicating here. He was trying to teach me music, how to read, how to count. And we traded out with him. We'd give him produce for the lessons. But anyway, it was fun learning. But so when people ask me, "Yeah, did you play trumpet?" I said, "Yeah, I played mostly by ear." And they'd say, "Oh, well, that's good." I said, "Yeah, it was hard too, because most people use their lips, So that was always good for a laugh too. But I many years ago heard a famous comedian. I don't remember his name. It could have been Jack Benny or Jimmy Durante or one of those icons of comedy. That I heard him say that he loved making people happy and made them, love people, laugh and all that. And he said, always try to leave them laughing. And I thought, golly, that's pretty neat. I'm going to try to imitate him and do that in my poor way. I've tried to do that through the years. I think it's a pretty nice way to live. And I probably did it very poorly, but I always try to leave people laughing. Well, to end this tape before you guys all fall asleep, there's always remember that there's a famous saying I just love. We go around saying, have a nice day, have a good evening, things like that. Well, the Italians threw a Capuchin monk many years ago who died when I was in high school. He was in Italy, and his name was Father Pio, P-I-O, which means pious in English. He started saying way back there before this expression, have a nice day, became, used so much. I'd never heard it much before until the last few years, 20, 30 years maybe. But he said in Italian, fare una bella giornata, and translated, literally means go make a nice day. And so I pass that on to you. Go make a nice day. And God bless you. And I just want to tell you that I grew up in a wonderful time. Poor's church mice and struggling and all that, but it taught me a lot. And I wouldn't trade my life for anybody. I also want to thank my wife, Dorothy, who's been tremendous for me. She's been just a fantastic partner. And there's an old saying that behind every good man or great man, well, I don't think about whether I'm a great man or not, but I tried to be a good man, is a famous woman. And Dorothy has always been the wind beneath my wings. Thank you, and Father, and I better should myself.